embodied living and collective healing. I love this new phrasing I'm work with. Really, really focused on capturing this idea that has to do with being done with the framework that I was taught and that you were probably taught, that if we want to help the world, that we have to sacrifice ourselves, right? We all know what it looks like to sacrifice ourselves, our mental health, our physical health, our well-being, so that we can show up and do good work in the world. The flip side of that being that, we're selfish and focused on ourselves and our own healing. And that means that we can't show up for others. I'm done with it. I'm done with it. It's a framework that was taught to me, and it's one that I'm calling bullshit on, because what I understand now, given my years studying the human body, studying human health, studying neuroscience, right? Years doing all I could to understand the design of a human body and moving that into yoga and other philosophies that really help us understand the human experience, right? Exploring all these different places. What I understand now is we are biological beings, and we are intricately connected to all that is outside of ourselves. And on top of that, when it comes to our own understanding of ourselves, it's so limited. It's so limited. All these different models and frameworks I was taught to understand who I am as a human being, they're so limited, right? So when it comes to a simple question, that is how we show up in the world, how we show up in our lives, our perspectives are just so limited. So what if, instead of taking on any more of these limited views, we, for a moment, maybe you're on board with me here, or maybe you're brand new and you're like, whoa, what is this girl talking about? Here's an invitation, okay? For these next 20 minutes as we sit down in this video, maybe we can put aside those frameworks, those very limited frameworks that we've been taught, and step into a space where we get to understand ourselves as infinitely more complex than any model has ever taught us. And we get to understand ourselves and our interactions with the world as far, far more vastly complex than we had ever imagined, right? So if all the different components and mechanisms and different parts of ourselves that make us up and contribute to our experience in every moment as life unfolds, and if we take each of those individual component and mechanisms and think about how they're all tied to every other component and mechanism and pathway unfolding out in the world, God, it's too much. It's too much. Your head starts to explode, right? Maybe you start feeling it. And I'm going to invite you here to drop out of your head and feel into your body, right? Can you start to feel maybe a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of a freeze response? Like, where are we going? There's just so much here. Which starts to get to my point, right? Again, if you've been with me for a while, I think you may start to know the direction that I lead us down as we spend our lives in our heads trying to think think about all these things. Think about all the different parts of ourselves. Think about how all the different parts of ourselves are connected to that which is greater than ourselves. Well, what if instead of thinking, we took a moment to stop thinking, to drop out of our heads, and to feel into our experience in the world? So again, an invitation. I strongly recommend that you actually do this with me here. Dropping out of your head, maybe feeling your feet on the floor, perhaps finding your breath as your body's expanding on the inhale, exhaling, and taking a moment to feel what is alive for you in this moment. Knowing that what's alive for you is going to be a combination of where you were, what was going on, the state of your nervous system, the state of the rest of your body as you entered into this video. Knowing that the words I'm sharing, the way I'm sharing these words, all the different parts of this video, that's all impacting what's going on in your body right now. You feel tired. You feel a little buzzing, maybe some heat. Just taking a moment to name the 2 or 3 different sensations you're feeling in your body right now. So why do we do this? Why does an engineer, scientist on a path to get a PhD in neuroscience and do all I could to understand all I could about all the pathways and mechanisms underlying the human body and just doing all I could to learn all those little tidbits? Why am I now here teaching you to let go of fat and to do the exact opposite of what we were all taught, which is to feel, which is to take a few moments, right? This doesn't have to be a permanent way of living. Right? Just take a few moments and feel. It's like going into that place that they always taught us to avoid. Right? Oh, they're just feelings, they're just emotions, just ignore them. They're just distractions on our path of progress and creating great things with the brilliant human mind. Well, what happens? What happens as we move forward along that path? Well, I can say for myself what happened is that all this information in my head kept building and building and building. I would sit down at my computer, behind my computer screen, and I would fight to make utility out of it. I would do all that I could to make meaning and make impact and use this information to make the lives of others better, make the world a better place. And the problem I came across is in doing it all from my head, I never created an opportunity for it to land, for it to be embodied and to be able to experience, is this information useful? Does this information truly, actually make the lives of an individual or of an ecosystem any better? Now, as an engineer, and as a scientist, right, they're similar. I was taught ways to quantify and qualify this. Many, many different ways that I still call upon in my day job, is ways to use our heads, use our logic, analyze things based off of metrics that we've determined, yeah, that makes an outcome better. And those are wonderful. I'm glad we have those in place. And at the same time, I often question, does this number actually translate to an embodied experience where that person is truly feeling better, feeling more joy, more peace, less pain, able to go out and live a more fulfilling life? How do we know? How do we know? How do we measure those outcomes? It doesn't always work so well if we're only doing it from up here. What works really well, as I've got to learn as a yoga teacher and embodiment coach, what works really well is dropping out of our heads and feeling. Did that thing that I just did, maybe it was something you ate, maybe it was an exercise, feeling in this moment, did that actually make me feel the way I wanted to feel? That actually make me feel better? And because life doesn't exist as a single moment, life exists as moment after moment unfolding, recognizing that we have to do this practice regularly, right? Because that workout I just did, I may not feel its effects, its greatest effects, until the next day, the next week, the next month, if I keep doing it consistently. So yes, let us go read the book and listen to the podcast and think about other people's ideas for, yeah, go make that change in your diet or make that change in your exercise routine, because scientists have quantified or qualified something and determined that doing this, making this change, makes this outcome improved. Try it out. Doing so, always coming into this practice that is feeling. It's so simple. It's so simple. Now that I've been in this space for a few years now, I laugh because it's so simple. Like, hey, let's just take a moment to feel. And then I feel like a fool because I'm like, why am I creating a whole YouTube video to teach people how to feel? And then I remember the 20-something years of my life when everything people told me was the opposite. Again, that, oh, it's just an emotion or it's just a feeling, right? What really matters is what's going on up here. What's really matters is your vision and what you want and staying the path. And if you're going to do that, we have to ignore our feelings and our emotions. And no, can't we welcome it all in? Can't we welcome it all in for what it is? Information and experience. Welcoming it all in, calling upon all of it. Yes, what's arising in our bodies. Yes, what's going on in our heads. And using it all to learn to make better decisions. Yes, calling upon that data that's coming from that scientist. Yes, calling upon that advice coming from that podcast. Yes, calling upon how it all lands in my own body. All of it. Can we welcome in all of it? That's my invitation. That's my invitation today, is to stop putting things in a hierarchy. We're so good at that in this world, right? Mind over matter. What if we just welcome it all in? Learn to be with it all and call upon it as we learn to make better and better and better decisions in life. So here's the second part I want to talk about, because it turns out there is an art to this. There is an art to this. And I don't think we're going to go into full depth. Maybe that will become part 2. Speaking to this art and skill that is feeling, that is being embodied, because it is an art, it is a skill that we develop over time. And there's many different reasons why it's difficult to jump straight in. So as I show up and I'm like, hey, can't we just feel? Right? There's a lot of different obstacles to do that. Number one, again, is all those stories that have been instilled in ourselves as beliefs that it's a silly thing to do, right? And even if, on some level here, you're hearing me and you're like, yeah, Katie, that makes sense. That makes sense. But then going to implement this in your life, you might run into resistance because you might have deep-seated beliefs that this isn't really the way you should be living life and making choices. So there's work to do there, right? As you sort of unwind or dissolve the beliefs that don't actually serve. Now, there's also this very important piece that is being able to feel in a safe, supported way. So if someone, and I talk about this because this is exactly what I went through. As someone who had spent in 20 so odd years completely living life from my head, not letting myself feel, when a feeling came up, pushing it aside. As we start to feel, there can be a lot. There can be a lot there. And that can be really overwhelming. And so as we start to feel, as we start to be with the sensations, what's alive in our felt experience in the world, things can get intense. Things can get triggering. We can find ourselves running away and coming up with all sorts of stories about how this is the worst thing in the world and we can't do this. And so we find ourselves up in our heads again while our bodies are not feeling good, right? And that's not the outcome we want. So we need to be able to gently, skillfully learn to be in our bodies again. And that is a whole can of worms, because each of us are our own selves with our own bodies. And each of us, given our own unique experiences in this world, the process is going to look a little different. So me here as some stranger on the internet giving out advice, sharing my thoughts, if I were to give you a practice, I don't know if it's necessarily going to help you. I know this, again, because I myself went through it, and I've had the privilege of working with other individuals, and the process gets to unfold step by step as we can try it out. Is a box breath supportive for you? Is a Ashtanga yoga class beneficial for you? Is what I teach, slowly moving and breathing, is it beneficial for you? Well, there's a lot there, right? There's a lot there. So we get to carefully, slowly, skillfully take steps into this space. And as always, it's worth mentioning that I have my different offerings, my membership, my one-on-one coaching. If you want to shoot me an email and we can set up a call, or go check out the membership, see if that resonates for you. Or maybe it's finding a yoga therapist in your town so that you can go work with someone one-on-one in real space. There's so many different options for us today, which is beautiful. It's so beautiful that we've entered this world where people are starting to understand these things, and there's so many different ways to find support. The key piece here, knowing that you get to be in charge, right? You get to be in charge of your own healing. You get to be in charge of knowing, okay, when I do that practice, that's actually really activating. So I can stop and I can say, no, I'm not going to do that. Or, wow, that practice is really amazing. And, that teacher didn't really think it was going to be that great, but wow, it's the greatest thing in the world. So that's my thing. And I can do that all the time and see where that takes me. But it only works. It only works, right? If we're not in just these conversational spaces, if we're not just thinking about the practices, if we're not doing the practices but staying so up in our heads and being like, my teacher told me this was going to work, so I'm just going to trust it's going to work. That's not how we get to do things anymore. I mean, sure, you can keep trying it and see where it takes you. The invitation from me being always dropping into your experience, experiencing for yourself. Is this helpful? Is this harmful? Is this neutral and just a waste of my time? So that's a nice little meander into this healing space. Your healing. And to wrap up today, weaving back into this collective healing. Collective healing. Because again, right, I opened this conversation by talking about this really outdated framework that I, maybe really served in a lot of ways, but these days I see causing so much harm when we walk through life thinking, oh, it's my healing, or it's my work in the world. Oh, it's my own how I feel, or it's how my family feels. It's not really how it works. Because as we heal our own patterns, right, we get to show up in a more skillful, more grounded way in life, and we get to interact with others in a way that, maybe promotes their healing, or if nothing else, isn't so triggering to others. There's so many different ways, right? We don't have time to list all the different ways that you healing your nervous system, getting to know yourself better, transfers over to your interactions with another human being, or transfers over to your ability to manage a group of people or hold space for people or show up and be able to focus on your work and do a great job. And it ripples out, always rippling out in so many more ways than we can possibly think of. Again, can we just stop trying to fit all the pieces together? Do the work, do the healing, and experience what happens as you show up in other spaces in your life. I know I opened some doors in this conversation that I didn't quite close the loop on, but that's okay. We have many more videos to continue to keep talking about these concepts, these ideas, and to embody them, to start to do the practice, be in the experience that actually creates change. So with that, if you have not yet subscribed, please make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you're alerted when those next videos come out. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button. It helps so much as we are building this community. And if you had any big ahas or any big insights, any experience that you think like, wow, that really shifted the way I was taught. And, even if you're not quite sure about that, like, there might be something there, please leave a comment. I would love to know the parts of these conversations that are really, really making the most impact so that I can dive deeper into those ideas and keep diving into these ideas, all that jazz. So, yes. And again, one more shout out to the We Are the Forest membership. It's our most simple space to come together in practice. It's a space I love creating deeper, fuller guided practices, keeping it very simple so that you can call upon these practices in any moment or set aside some time to really create some devoted practice to working on this art and skill. And with that, whatever the next spaces that we find ourselves in, I look forward to seeing you there.